What's up? This is Mark Lopes from Metal Church of Ross the Boss Band. Let us pray. And you're listening to Aftershocks TV. And don't forget to keep it fucking metal. Yeah.
Yep.
And you know, and so that leads us actually into what we're going to talk about next, because because the U.S. is not really. I mean, they've been trying to bring festival. They've done a better job here in the States than years previous in terms of bringing some of these sort of European UK style festivals over here to the States. We've got the Aftershock Festival now. Pun intended with the Aftershocks TV here, but Aftershock Festival obviously had here in Sacramento. Which it's kind of like that. You've got Metallica's and you've got a lot of your really your deathy type of bands too, mixed with some radio friendly rock and metal bands as well. And it's doing pretty good, but I don't think that's a formula that's going to be a long lasting thing here. Like you've seen these festivals last years and years now over in Europe. That have been going on forever, Donington and like you said, Wacken and all these festivals. I don't know how long these festivals are going to. It seems like the States has tried this before, and it hasn't really, it hasn't lasted. So one of the things when I think about festivals, one of the festivals that really did a good job, lasting for quite some time, that helped also promote newer rock and metal bands, obviously was Ozzfest. Okay. So obviously Ozzfest has been gone though now. That was not, unfortunately what happens is, you get these festivals and what usually happens, it's not like these festivals are picking the hottest upcoming bands. No, they're giving these slots to whoever's the highest bidder. Right. And that usually comes from that's what Ozzfest really became after a while. You had all these labels just shelling out money to promote their bands to go on Ozzfest on the tour. And that's just not a sustainable, lasting formula, I think, for festivals here, because people here do like their corners. Because I saw that too with Ozzfest. Yeah, everyone who was into Pantera and Ozzy and just the bigger bands, they would go to the first stage. No, a lot of them didn't care about who was on that second stage, or the baby stage, as they call it, right? So I think I'm going to bring up here. This is a festival that's been, we were going to talk about this on the last show, but this is a festival that I think it's out of the Bay Area here. Okay. I think if you're going to do festivals here in the States, this is how you kind of have to do it. Yeah. You have to kind of do it in this way, because it's a new festival that's starting this year called the Omegafest. It's put on by Forbidden, the guys in Forbidden, Craig Cicero and Chris Contos, who's now in Forbidden as well. Obviously the drummer who's been in Machine Head and a ton of Bay Area bands over the years. The drummer. So this was something that I was so happy to see, because this is how I think you're going to grow festivals, and it's got to be sort of regional. Okay, so this is obviously a Bay Area fest. You've got just really, it's not like you have a ton of Bay Area bands playing there. You got a few, obviously. You got a couple. Forbidden obviously is the biggest one, and Hatred. Those are the two that are big out of here. But this is sort of, I like this festival. I'm really excited to see this because obviously I'm a huge Biohazard fan, and they're doing a reunion thing right now. So I'm glad they're coming up here to the Bay. But you've got a good blend here. Okay. Now this is sort of it's not a classic, old school heavy metal thrash festival. It's got a blend of everything in it. You've got the 90s with Biohazard, who's headlining. They were obviously a band that came out in the early 90s and did well in the early to mid 90s. Forbidden was one of those bands, right? Came out in the late 80s. They were been around forever, but they didn't really start putting out albums and get signed and so forth until about 88, 89-ish, I believe. And then you've obviously got a newer band with Warbringer, that was a mid-2000s band on that new wave of thrash metal that came out in the mid-2000s. Exciter, obviously, they're your classic band from the 80s in here. And then, of course, they did a great job bringing in, a Hatred and Bewitcher and all these more newer sort of thrashy, a couple of more death-tinged band. Just a good balance of not just the musical styles, but of the eras as well, which is what I like about this. And I think this is how festivals here are going to thrive. It's going to be regional. Yeah, I mean, to have a touring thing like Ozzfest, it was great for the time, but that's just not something that's going to be able to sustain itself. The reason why it really kind of went away, it just isn't going to work like that. They tried Tattoo the Earth Festival. That was another traveling tour that went from city to city. same thing. I mean, that's a great book that the guy who put that together, Scott, I forget his last name, but he talks about in this book about how it was just such a pain in the ass to go from place to place and to get, the cities to approve them to play there. You had a lot of pushback with a lot of the residents in the area, and that's why it just didn't last more than 1 year.
Sure.
And so I think this is the way you have to do it here in the States. You've got to not just make it one little corner of, just a thrash metal fest or a hardcore fest or a metalcore fest. No, it's a blend of everything. A little 80s, a little 90s, a little bit of new days, new style, 2000s, 2010, whatever it is, and putting them together regionally and not make it a traveling tour. Just do this in all the big cities. And we've been seeing it with things like Rocklahoma, right? That's lasted now for a while.
That's right.
That's a regional festival. So this is, just my take on how festivals should be here in the States. This is just a good example. The Omegafest. I'm really looking forward to something like this. I mean, what's your take on what do you think is a good way forward for festivals here in the States that in your opinion?
I think something like this. I mean, just before I answer that question, that music hall, what's the capacity of that music hall?
Okay, so UC Theater, it's not a huge, it's a perfect size place. I mean, it's hard to really put a number on it, but it's not a small club. It's not a huge club. It's just that right in the middle, I guess 1,000 to 2,000 people you could fit.
Yeah, that's decent. Yeah, I know that kind of in my head. Yeah, I can see that. But I think something like this, I mean, I would go and see this in a heartbeat, right? I'm not going to pretend to be a huge fan of every band on there, but I can talk about what I do like. In the sense that, and you said it's been put together by Forbidden. They're making a comeback and they've, reestablished their social media presence. And I just got to talk about Forbidden for just a second. That album they released, I've got the years here, 2010. That could be released today and you wouldn't know the difference.
Oh, yeah.
It's on, if you like Testament, you like Death Angel, you like thrash metal, you're going to love this. When you look at some of these bands, if you don't really, and I'm not claiming to know Forbidden's discography and I know all the band members, I don't. I know the last couple of albums and they are just unbelievable. Paul Bostov and Gene Hoglan played with Forbidden. So if those guys are just hanging their hat with that band, then that just give you an idea of the level of musicianship. So you don't even have to talk about that. It's an incredible album. Dates back, as I said, 2010. Check it out. You're going to love it. Biohazard, I think I saw them in Donington a couple of years ago. Can't even remember. Exciter, just classic thrash metal. We know all about that. And Warbringer came across my radar back during mid-2020 during COVID. And we were all just stuck at home doing whatever. And I don't know how I discovered them, read it on Blabbermouth, downloaded on Apple Music or whatever, and an incredible band. But what's interesting, if you look at the years, Biohazard last album was 2012. Everybody knows Evan Seinfeld. Forbidden was 2010. Exciter was 2010. But Warbringer was 2020. So I like the mix, to your point. I like the mix of what's coming in. The other bands on Frolic and Hellbender, I'm not overly, know the names, but not overly familiar with the music, so I can't really do it justice, but I will check it out. But I think this is an awesome kind of subsection of what a festival could be. It's never going to be an Ozzfest, and that's what we're going to talk about, but it's never going to be that. But I just think I would go and I traveled for this, and I'm getting to this stage, where I've seen so many bands. If I see anybody that's more than an hour away, I'm going, not too sure about that. Whereas when I was 16, I traveled 1,000 miles to see Iron Maiden. It's literally to the UK from Ireland. But now I'm just older, and it's selective, I guess. But I think this is an awesome lineup. Warbringer, Forbidden, Exciter, Jesus, Biohazard, come on.
I know. Tell me about it. And that's the thing too. I think, what happens with these festivals a lot of times is once it does well, okay, for more than a year, okay, each year, just like anything, and I understand it, right? It tends to grow and grow. So then so for this year, like this festival, okay, they are planning this Omegafest. They want to do this on an annual basis. That is the plan, which I think is great. I think every major city should have something like this, depending on, and it should be what the most important, I think, to this is it's led by band members in the scene. Like I said, Chris Contos and Craig LaCicera, guys who have been in the scene, the thrash scene in the Bay Area for decades. and they're the OGs here. And it's put together by them. It's not just some promoter coming out of town and coming in and do it. It's got to be. And then what happens with these festivals? It's just like we saw this. There's a great festival that I guess it started about 7-8 years ago. It's called Psycho Fest out of Vegas, and it started off as just like a stoner doomy type of festival. Okay, and Vegas is a great place. You got all these venues, right? It started to grow. It did well one year, got bigger the next. Next thing you know, by its third or fourth year, you have an Alice Cooper headline. You have a Megadeth there. You have Danzig. And I just think once I get that they want to make it bigger, but then once it gets to a specific size like that, you have to start compromising with the original idea of it. You can't have it at a smaller venue like this. You have to have it at a bigger venue if you bring in an Alice Cooper or a Megadeth, obviously. And then it's like we saw with even, I mean, I'm not into that music, but look at there was an indie rock fest that started out years ago that was taking place in this little town in the desert in Southern California called Coachella. Now we all know what that came about. Now you got the Kardashians and all them going to it. So this is what happens, unfortunately, here in the States.
That's
right? Because a lot of these promoters and people, just investors, whatever you want to call them, they see, oh, look at this thing going on out there. Wow, people are making a pilgrimage out there. And we've got to get our hooks into it now, and we got to skew it a little bit so we can get some higher profile people to go to it. And then it just loses what it originally was, and then it goes away. And when we kind of saw that with Ozzfest, because when Ozzfest started out, that was a great festival, meaning they were really promoting a lot of the new and upcoming bands in the late 90s there. Like for instance, I'm actually gonna bring, speaking of Ozzfest, we're gonna move this, but I want to bring something here. Let's go ahead. We're gonna look. Okay, just give me a second here to bring this up. We're gonna kind of look into, if you look at Ozzfest when it first started out, okay, in the year 97, I believe, or 96, I think 96 was the first one. Okay. So let's go ahead. We're going to bring this up because I want to just look at the bill here. Now, this was the second year, okay, that Ozzfest was about. Okay, I remember this was a huge year. It was I saw that what was the time was called Giant Stadium, which is now I believe Metropolitan Stadium in New Jersey, East Rutherford, New Jersey. Yeah, I mean, you had by the first year, you had a lot of more underground bands. You had your Ozzy, of course, who headlined it. And then the second year, they had it at a big stadium. You had Sabbath, you had Pantera, of course, but then you had a lot of no name bands at the time. You had Cold Chamber and Downset, and Slow Burn and Neurosis. So these were like bands, okay, in the late 90s where you had a lot of the new metal stuff in there. You had a lot of the stoner rock stuff with Slow Burn and Neurosis, which was sort of a doomy, experimental band. And then you had your Drain, STH, and Cold Chamber, again, new metal. On top of that, you had obviously the bigger name bands, Machine Head, Fear Factory, and Pantera, and so forth. But they had the big bands, and then they had that side stage for those really, those up and coming bands. And I loved it. And then as years went, on and on, the next thing you know, you had Iron Maiden, on there, and you had the biggest metal and rock bands known to man. Judas Priest, I think, might have played on there. I think one year. So it starts off with I think a real underground feel to it, mixed with some well-known bands. And then, of course, just obviously when promoters are coming when promoters are being offered $50,000 if you put this band on there, sure, why not? Come on. And the labels were doing that. Obviously, they were just, paying to have their bands on there. And it doesn't really come from this, I hate to use that word organic, but it doesn't come from that place of just based off of a great band. There has to be all this other stuff behind it. And so, speaking of Ozzfest, I don't know if you've heard, but there was this thing recently where Sharon Osbourne said that she's open to maybe having an Ozzfest again, but I don't think you can do that again. I don't think it's gonna last. They might be okay for a year or so, but I just don't think a festival like that is gonna work anymore in this day and age, in just the way the music is. I don't know. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think there's, well, first of all, the fact that it's been discussed is positive. Anybody who's promoting rock and metal, then I'm listening to it. So I like that part. Even if I don't like the genre, I said, hey, they're talking about it. But, the Ozzfest went from, in 96 to 2018. I thought it finished earlier than that. I moved to the US in 14, so I've never been to an Ozzfest for one reason or another. Maybe it just didn't come my way, or I was traveling or whatever. I used to travel a lot, but and the second stage was where a lot of the smaller bands jumped on board and became bigger bands, hopefully. But then a lot of them faded away. I was looking at Slow Burn, Pitch Shifter. They were a good English band. I remember that.
Yeah, I remember them. Yeah.
Yeah. I have
Industrial.
one CD by yeah, that's right. And then Ultra Spank, never heard of them, right? So they just drift. No, not every band.
Kind of industrial metal band too. Yeah.
I mean, but I like it gave them a shot basically, and whether it was a buy on or pay to play, I guess there was. But one of the things I read that Sharon said this week was that, hey, look, we're not trillionaires, and it's a lot of it is going to depend on, obviously, this is the music business. It has to make money. They have to make a profit. She's not going to go out on the road to break even. She doesn't need the money. You like to think she doesn't. It's called Ozzfest. Ozzy is no way playing those festivals. Ozzy, I'm a huge Ozzy fan, a huge Sabbath fan, but Ozzy's too old. He's too frail. He's getting older. And if she's talking about this now, then maybe, and even if they're thinking about doing it, it's not going to be until maybe 25, 26. Ozzy then is 2 years older. He's not going to be playing there. Ozzfest, the name Ozzfest is the brand. Obviously, to get to put people to put asses on seats. I get it. Ozzy's not going to be part of that. No way. Just based on his age, it's not going to happen. But hey, if it's coming back and it's coming my way and there's a decent lineup, what I'm not going to do, because again, too old, I'm not going to stand in the field for 8 hours watching 8 bands. No. Just not going to happen. I will come in for, unless it was an exceptional bill, maybe I take that back a little bit. But for the most part, I would just see somebody, the top 3 or 4. I've seen a lot of bands over the years. I may have seen them in the year gone by and said, I ain't going out at 2 o'clock in the day to stand in the field no way. Drinking beer in a hot sun or
just
whatever.
Can't do it anymore.
Which is great when I was 22 or something,
exactly.
but not at 53.
No.
Hell no.
Yeah. No, and that's a great point too. You bring up. There's 2 things you just brought up right there. Like you said, I think it's the music business, right? So any of these organic festivals like this, the Omegafest, right? Something small like that can sustain itself because again, there's a business part to it, but it's not so much a business.
The overheads,
the overhead for like you said, putting a festival out in the field and stuff. Forget it. It's too much that goes into it. If you keep it sort of small and you keep it a little bit more, intimate that way, I think that's what makes these festivals last. Once you start bringing in a bunch of, of the big business and the agents, you bring in the managers, and of course everyone wants their piece, and that's understandable. Like you said, it's a business, and so you just can't have a really organic festival like that unless you keep it to a certain capacity, a limit.
But I remember, Matt, just really quick, I remember going to the Doningtons, talking about the Doningtons. So I went to Donington 86, 87, 88 and 91, I think it was. I think they're the years. And even back then, I was just looking at some of the eclectic I've written, like I went to 87. I was at 87. So Bon Jovi were basically arguably the biggest band in the world. Slippery When Wet was out, and they were on that tour. It was Bon Jovi, Dio, Metallica, written down, Anthrax, Wasp, and Cinderella. I mean,
wow.
There was, I would guess, 70,000 people there. Following year was Maiden, Kiss, David Lee Roth, Megadeth, Guns N' Roses, and Halloween. There was 107,000 people at that. Now, This was Maiden on their Seventh Son of a Seventh Son tour. So they were arguably the biggest metal band in the world. They were bigger than Metallica in 88 for sure. Because obviously the back album was a couple of years away. And then over the years, then there was a mix of different bands. But I think I don't know what the festival is. Again, I'm older, so I'm not looking at festivals. So if a 35-year-old is a big metal fan like we are, is that appealing to them anymore? I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if the appetite is there for festivals, or is it just the big mega gigs like Metallica, with Pantera or whomever is touring? Is that where it's going as opposed to having 10 bands on over 10 hours? I don't know.
I would just venture a guess. I don't know either. You're right, but I would venture a guess it's that. It's not going to be the big festivals, and the reason why is just because of what you said before. That I want to bring up was people our age. I mean, for one, okay, the festival. I mean, it's a lot of money, right? So a lot of young metal fans, are they going to pay that kind of money?
Sure.
$100 plus $50 a day to see a festival. I don't know. I don't think so, because you're on top of you know, parking and a part of whatever you're gonna buy at the show,
Yeah.
whether it's refreshments and beverages and merch. I mean, it's like we say, anytime you go to these sort of shows or festivals these days, you're easily $300 to $500 easily.
100%. You're buying a beer for $15, and that's one
Exactly.
beer. So
Exactly. So I just don't see, you know, a lot of the younger generation doing that. But another thing is, you said, but for guys, even for like ourselves, for people like ourselves in our 40s and 50s and so forth, we're not going to stand in a field, like you said,
Fuck
for
no.
10 hours because it's like I can't sit there and have one beer every 3 hours. I can't do it, man. I like to have I like to go with it as I'm going with the music. But if you've got 10 to 20 bands, it's hard to keep up with.
This is no word of a lie. Richie, again, talking about Richie and Focus on Metal, he was there looking at the year 1988. Megadeth were on, and then remember, there's 107,000 people, so you got to go for a piss every 20 minutes. You got to grab a beer every half hour, whatever. But we were drinking pretty heavily, if I can remember.
Sure.
And we were obviously you did it in rounds, so we were bringing back 3 beers, walking down, and then there was this much gone when you got back, right? Because you were just meandering through whatever. And I, if I can remember right, I miss Megadeth going for a beer because it took me 40 minutes to go and get the fucking beer.
See, there you go,
as all I saw was him coming on stage, and I was trying to look back or whatever. I missed the entire set getting a beer, and then by the time you get back, there's this much gone. And then you drink that quick as it's a hot sunny day, and then the next guy goes up. And this went on all day long. And then, you take one piss, you're done. Right? Yeah. You're done. And then, so I can't go back.
Break that seal and that's it. Yeah.
I don't have every half hour. What's more is I don't want to do it. I don't even know if there would be a festival good enough to make me do that.
Again,
I don't think it's there.
No, not one that's got, and that's the thing, 2 festivals, right? There's certain bands you want to go see at those festivals, but they're also only going to play for 20, 25 minutes.
That's right.
So that's the thing too. So that's why I think this Omegafest stuff like that, at least for like I said, old fucks like us, it's like perfect because you've got 8 bands. Even my buddy, when I showed him that, he's like, I'm not going to get there to start that I don't have the stamina for that. Maybe we'll do like 5 or 6 of those bands, and then that's it. But it's at least it's doable because something like that's doable because it's also at a smaller location. Like you said, you're not waiting online for 40 minutes to take a piss.
I do that. I would do that. And it's indoors. I mean, indoors versus outdoors. That's a big thing too. So
that's the thing too. I mean, I get fried. I burn like a lobster. So I can't, to me, be in the sun for all day. It's just, no, I can't do it, man.
I did that. I went to see Guns N' Roses. I think it was, they played Slane Festival in Ireland. Was it Guns N' Roses. And it was a stinking hot day, which is unusual in Ireland. And whatever way the sun was coming down was just beating on this side of my head. So I got fried on this side, and this side was perfect. So, and I'm not a Guns N' Roses fan, so what a waste of a day that was.
I know, right?